for my 10 hours of field experience in the special needs classrooms, I observed a kindergarten through second grade classroom, special education room, and a third through fifth grade special education room, and a regular classroom with special needs learners in that classroom as well. In the kindergarten through second grade classroom, there were children that had Down syndrome and autism, and there were a couple other disorders that I couldn't exactly tell what they were, and due to legal reasons, they were unable to tell me exactly what the children had. And in the third through fifth grade classroom, they were also all children with autism and Down syndrome. And in the general classroom with the special needs learners, I observed children that had ADHD and ADD. In the kindergarten through second grade classroom was the first classroom that I observed, and whenever I first walked in, it was much different than I had expected. It didn't even have lights on. They only have lamps in that classroom. The teacher has decided that she thinks that the children learn better and they can focus better if the lights are dimmed down. All of the kids have their own personal chart that they stick their pictures on for the activity that they're going to. The room is set up in just stations. They don't have a regular looking general classroom. There is, if I remember right, there was 8 different stations. They had, most of the stations were just stations where they got to choose what they wanted to do. Some of them had puzzles or different games and things like that. And then there was a group session where only 2 or 3 kids would go into the group at once. And then there was a large group where all the students would go. And they also had self-led learning where they would do math activities and things like that. And then also a teacher-directed station where a teacher would work one-on-one with this student and teach them math typically, or occasionally they'd work on letters and things. And that was the same way for the third through fifth grade classroom, only the lights were on. That teacher didn't think that having the lights dim did any difference for the kids. And then in the general classroom, it was set up just like a regular classroom, and the kids that had the different special learning disabilities, they actually wore headphones to try to keep them able to be focused. They were just large-sized headphones that could block out extra noise, and they could only hear the things that were right near them. And the teachers said that they had noticed a huge difference in the kids that had, whenever they actually wore their headphones versus when they didn't. They decided that they didn't get distracted nearly as often. I think that the strategies that I saw in all of the classrooms, they seem to work fairly well. With the kids all having different disabilities, all the kids are different, so it's kind of hard to tell what worked well and what didn't, because they all learn quite differently. I did notice a huge difference in the kindergarten through second grade classroom versus the third grade through fifth grade classroom as far as abilities that the kids had. Even, the second graders had a much lower education level than the third graders did, and they seemed just completely on different levels. And I know their disabilities did play into that, so I don't know if the different learning techniques of the different classrooms had something to do with that, or why that was, but they definitely did seem to accelerate much more than the kindergarten through second grade classroom. All the kids in the kindergarten through second grade class, none of them knew their letters at all. A couple of them knew a few numbers, but that's about all that they really knew as far as the general things that they should have known for their age. And but in the third through fifth grade classroom, there were children that they could tell time, and they could do very basic addition if they were doing it with manipulatives. They couldn't just do it on paper, but if they were using objects, they could do it. They also knew how to use different monies as far as they could use some coins, and they could use dollar bills. They didn't work any higher than just the dollar bills, but they did know their coins pretty well, especially for their disabilities. And in the general classroom, the children that had different learning disabilities, I mean, what I noticed, they could not sit still was the biggest thing that I had noticed. They wouldn't, they just could not focus at all. They would sit and they'd tap their pencil, or they'd tap their feet, or they'd just stop and put their hand on their, or they put their face on their hands like this and look all over the place like this. And that's just what I saw the majority of the time. When I was observing, they were only taking tests at that time, and so it was a quiet time where I could just observe them individually rather than watching them in the class. However, there was an assembly that I got to observe and watch the kids in the assembly to see how they acted in a large group. And the special needs are in the kindergarten through second grade classroom. Some of them were really good and they sat down. One of the children that had autism, from what I assume, he would not sit still, and he had to be taken out because he kept trying to get up and was making loud noises that he was able to make, and he wasn't able to vocalize anything. All he can do is just make noises, so they were very distracting for the rest of the children. And the same with the third through fifth grade classroom, although there was only one other person in the third through fifth grade classroom that also had to be taken out for doing the same thing. But the children with the ADD and ADHD that were in the assembly, they just sat down and you couldn't even tell that they did have a problem at all. And my personal opinions on the way that the class was taught, I feel as though the kids and particularly the kindergarten through second grade classroom, they didn't have enough time amongst others. They, for the most part, were only working by themselves. They didn't really, they would occasionally be with one or two other students, but they only had one short period of time where they actually, all 7 of them were together in the class, and that was only for 15 minutes a day. And then if they ate lunch, then they would be together, but other than that, they were just by themselves working. And I think that it's crucial for the children to interact with others to get that social aspect of learning. On Fridays, they were allowed to go eat lunch with the other kids in school that for their age range, but they didn't sit by them. They sat at a completely different section of the lunchroom, and they would look, but they didn't really seem too terribly interested. As far as I think they just seemed really nervous to go around the other kids. The third through fifth grade, I feel like they had quite a bit more interaction with each other. They had a lot more group time. They actually had, in just the 4 hours that I observed them, they had, I would say, at least an hour to an hour and a half of time with the entire class together. And then whenever they ate lunch, they also ate amongst the other students. The only ones that weren't allowed to eat with their, what would be their regular classmates, were the ones that were in wheelchairs, and then they, of course, just sat with the teachers. And I didn't observe the general classroom very long. I only observed that classroom for 2 hours, so I didn't really get to see, them at recess or something like that. So I thought for what they did, I think that that classroom was working fairly well. In the third through fifth grade classroom, I think that the kids were given a lot more independence, which I think that you could tell a huge difference in the kids whenever they did get to do things independently, as far as going to get their coats themselves or going to go change their picture chart. And their picture chart is just, at the beginning of the day, the teacher puts up a chart, a list of pictures, and then the kid goes and they take a picture off each time that they switch a station, and then they go put it at that station. And the kids got to do that on their own in the third through fifth grade classroom, and I think that they enjoyed doing that. And in the kindergarten through second grade classroom, occasionally a kid would get away and be able to do it on their own, which I think they preferred doing, but the teachers didn't seem very apt to let them do that. So I think that I would definitely try to give the kids as much independence as I feel they can handle, and also try to keep them, let them have enough social time for them just to be with their peers rather than only sitting there working by themselves on different activities or with a para. I also think that whenever I have my classroom, I won't have nearly as many paras as the classrooms that I was in. Their para ratio was one para for every one student, and then there'd be one extra student left over. They had extremely too many paras, in my opinion. I think that the kids felt too comfortable with having somebody constantly sit there and tell them how to do things, and I feel as though having the paras there, they didn't do everything as much as they could have on their own. For example, whenever they would do an activity on an iPad, if the teacher felt, or the para felt as though the child was taking too long, they would just do it for them and then mark off that the kid had done it. I don't think that that's appropriate. I think that the children need to have adequate time to do things. I don't want to rush the children in my classroom. I also want to make sure that I'm very aware of what their disabilities are and having a specific learning plan for each child, because I felt as though a couple of the kids, their disabilities were definitely unique to the others, as all the disabilities are, but they didn't have just a general disability such as Down syndrome. So the paras in particular didn't really know how to handle their disabilities and how they needed to learn. So they just kind of let things go. They just tried to go with the flow of things. It was as structured as could be, but I feel as though I don't want to have that many pairs. I don't think that it was very helpful for the children. Something else that I would like to do in my classroom is to let them do more art than what I saw them doing in the other classes. I know that children with autism, they typically aren't very creative because they are very set as far as, one of the teachers was telling me, if you told a child with autism to write mom or draw a picture of mom, they would write out the word mom rather than draw a picture. So I would try to encourage the creativity with the children with autism. And I also had observed that one of the paras that was working with a child that had autism, the child was trying to sort out dinosaurs. They were foam dinosaurs that had been cut out as an activity, and then they were supposed to organize them into different piles in a tray. And the child was very, very organized with it. He did it. He picked up and he organized the dinosaurs by the kind of dinosaur and the color that they were, and made sure that they were lined up perfectly with each other, rather than just grabbing them one by one and putting them in their correct bin. He made sure to get one category at a time, and the teacher was getting irritated and just told him, oh, just rush through it, come on, let's get done. And I feel as though I would rather let the child work at their own pace and try not to let them think that everything has to be so organized all the time, but also let them kind of have free reign, so I don't feel as though I'm pushing them to do anything, because I don't want them to feel uncomfortable, because you could tell in that child that he started to get frustrated and that he wasn't very apt to finish the activity once the teacher was consistently pushing him to just rush through everything. But ultimately, I feel as though it was a great learning experience to go observe all the different classrooms. I feel that picking out the 3 classrooms was the best choice. That way I got to have a different feel for the different disabilities and the different age groups. And also being able to have a short amount of time in just a regular classroom with children that had special needs. It definitely is going to help me in the future in my own classroom. So I think it was a great opportunity.